Hello, thanks for tuning into this video where I'm going to explain my yoga class inspired by this week's Parsha, Parsha Miketz. And in this video, I'm going to be doing the philosophical explanation. I'm splitting out the physical explanation, and to see that video, you need to go subscribe on my blog, so go do that. And remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications here on YouTube for these videos. Thanks. So without further ado, I'm going to go into my Parsha Takeaway and how that affected the sequencing of the class this week. So the Pharaoh dreams that 7 fat cows are swallowed by 7 lean cows, and 7 robust ears of grain are swallowed by 7 wimpy ears of grain. He wasn't able to make sense of the detail that fat cows and lean cows could coexist, and neither could anyone else who interpreted his dreams. That was until Joseph shared his interpretation of the dreams with the Pharaoh. Joseph predicted that there will be 7 years of plenty in terms of agriculture, and followed by 7 years of hunger. The years of plenty are represented by the fat cows and the robust grain. Joseph advises to store grain during the plentiful years. This way, it's like the plentiful years can support or swallow up the following years of hunger, which are represented by the lean cows and tattered grain. So naturally, as things tend to work out for Joseph, he's appointed as governor of Egypt, and he oversees the storage of grain during those plentiful years. As Joseph predicted, famine spreads after those 7 plentiful years are over. But Egypt is prepared with all of its stored grain. Surrounding nations weren't as well prepared and would travel to Egypt in search of food. Coincidentally, 10 of Joseph's brothers came to Egypt to purchase grain. Joseph recognizes them, but they don't recognize him. He insists that they're spies and that they bring their one other brother, Benjamin, to prove that they are who they say they are. When they come back, Joseph invites them all to dinner, but he implants a valuable item in Benjamin's belongings. The next morning, they're pursued and arrested, presumably for theft of this item. So Joseph offers to set them free while keeping Benjamin. Actually, each of these times that Joseph sees his brothers, he tries to maintain his composure, being that he's now this powerful, authoritative figure, but multiple times he needs to go to a private place to cry it out. So much is going on here in this Parsha, as always, but I want to focus on how Joseph's tears and emotions tie into the paradox of dreams versus reality. So R.I.P. Mitch Hedberg, one of my favorite stand-up comics, he's got a really great joke about dreams. And to paraphrase, he says, "I hate dreaming. There I am in a comfortable bed. Next thing you know, I have to build a go-kart with my ex-landlord." Dreams are riddled with muddled metaphors, horrific exaggerations, and logical impossibilities. Like in the Pharaoh's dream, how could a cow even be simultaneously fat and lean? If there's enough food in the area for cows to be well fed, why aren't all the cows fat, or at least equal? Essentially, the concern here is how can there be good and bad at the same time? But you have to stop and think, isn't that just regular life? There's countless injustices in this world that don't make sense in the real life. Forget the dream world. We live in a reality where pretty much everything is a blessing and a curse. The freedoms we have unleash both the best and the worst of people. For example, let's take something as simple as eating. Compulsive eating can literally kill you, but you still need to eat to live. The same is true of every negative phenomenon. Each one is just a healthy instinct gone awry. There's nothing actually intrinsically bad in this world. Have you ever heard of killing someone with kindness? Yeah, it's a thing. So, how do we deal with this mess? What does Joseph do with these seemingly crazy dreams? He says, don't run from the dream. Look for a meaning and use it. From Pharaoh's dreams, Joseph comes up with the idea to store grain from the plentiful years. And there's an interesting detail that he demands here to keep the grain from rotting. Store the grains with soil in the place from which each one grew, and it worked. Metaphorically, we need spiritual sustenance from our origins. from like our creation, our source of creation, for strength of character. But Joseph doesn't do the same for himself as he does with the grain. The Egyptians saw him as this powerful figure, but what does he do when his past comes knocking? He crumbled. We see that Joseph's transformation turned out to be more dreams than reality. He changed his external image, but never dealt with the traumas of his origins. Which, if you go back to the other Parshas, that's what I'm referring to. He didn't use the paradox that he was presented in his life to change from the inside out. The exile we live in is as crazy as our dreams. We can't run from it. We must look for meaning and use it. So, yeah, that's kind of the breakdown there, like my takeaway. And then to go into the class sequencing, again, you need to subscribe to see the actual like physical benefit where I talk about fascia. I'll get to that in a moment. But in the reset, we do this cat and cow at least 7 times, and that's to represent, the cows in the Pharaoh's dreams, the 7 fat cows and the 7 lean cows. And then we sit back on the heels and stretch side to side. So that's kind of like the Pharaoh looking side to side for like guidance, for interpretation, but just he continues looking. Like nobody's interpretations are like making sense until Joseph's interpretations. Then we get into the abs where we take the block, and I kind of like to think that the block is like the representation of like having sustenance, like the years of plenty. So we stick it on one side of the leg, and the other side of the leg doesn't have a block, obviously. So it's kind of like the coexisting of the years of plenty and the years of lean, and we switch legs. So it's like, oh, we're showing that we have that at the same time. And then during the sun 1, A, and B, we do the typical sun salutations movements, but we prep the body for movements to be seen in the flow without the block. So that's kind of like going like through our day-to-day, doing the work that we need to do, and then we're like preparing for those years of lean. So in the flow, we do a lot of those same movements, but with the block. So it's like as if we have those years of plenty with us. And in general, like the movements, I do some of my favorite lit essential movements, as I like to call them. But then at the end, we go through a series of kind of like warrior and goddess. We go up and then we bend down, and then we come back up at the triangle, then we whatever. So this is kind of like Joseph like trying to look like mighty. And then at the end, we do a seated twist facing the back. And that's really to represent that, like, even though he's trying to look mighty, he always just like comes down into this like small state and is facing away and has to cry on his own. Yeah, and then at the end we revisit that cat-cow, this time with like different legs because we've increased our pliability with the fascia, and cat-cow, and it's kind of like this internal struggle that he has. So yeah. Now I've mentioned fascia a few times. I'll talk about that quickly in this video, and then in the physical breakdown, which you need to subscribe on my blog to see, I'll talk about how like we actually get into the fascia this week with these specific movements. So what is fascia, and why/how does this week's class focus on it? It's sort of a webbing that's all over everything in our body, and it has the appearance of cellophane-like fibers, and it contains collagen, elastin, protein, and water molecules. So sometimes, when you move, you crunch a little bit, and that's kind of just like getting like the water molecules moving and hydrating the fascia. Healthy fascia is hydrated, and it allows for enhanced pliability by distributing energy and sending communications to our brain about our movement patterns. So sounds great. Yeah. So thank you so much for listening into this video. Subscribe on my blog, like this video, subscribe on YouTube, turn on notifications, all the good stuff. I don't want any of you to miss out. I've got like a lot of good information on this, and I'm really excited to be sharing this journey of Parsha and Prana with you. So thank you very much. See you next week, and Shabbat Shalom.